For more on what we can expect, I spoke to Robin Wigglesworth. He's the U.S. markets editor for the Financial Times, and I asked him to outline what to expect when the summit starts.
Three big topics will probably be global growth. It always seems to be at these G20 meetings. The migrant crisis in Europe, and climate change. And we have also another meeting looming in Paris where all these countries are going to be also getting together and trying to thrash out some sort of deal to try and cap emissions. And those are going to be the three main things they're going to be fighting about.
All right, so let's start with the migrants. This is a very serious situation. Some of the experts that we've spoken to say they would like the rest of the world, of course, obviously Europe as well, to do more in terms of money, to do more in terms of accepting more migrants into their country. And I'm wondering from you, what would a successful discussion look like? Is it just about the money, or is it about countries perhaps being more open-minded about their borders?
I think you're right. I think that's exactly it. It's about money and keeping borders open. The problem is, everybody agrees that something has to be done, but everybody agrees it has to be somebody else doing it. It's always the issue with some of these more touchy subjects. Everybody realizes that there's this huge humanitarian catastrophe happening. This is one of the biggest migrant flows since World War II, and countries have started letting people in, but they're just getting swamped. And everybody seems to think that somebody else should be really dealing with this. If they can get some sort of agreement of any kind, that would be positive, but I'm not particularly optimistic. I think it's going to be a lot of finger pointing and heated rhetoric, but not much more.
Are you more optimistic about the discussions on climate change?
No, not really on the G20 level. Clearly there is a political will to get something done, but essentially it still boils down to that everybody else wants everybody else to do more rather than themselves. And they all have very good reasons why their country or their bloc should not have to do as much. The Europeans have stepped up a little bit now. They want a legally binding treaty. And the Americans have said, well, that isn't going to pass our Congress, so we can't do that. So there's going to be some sort of fudge. I imagine hopefully they'll have some sort of constructive talks and again come up with some sort of bland communique, which is what the G20 excels at, and maybe actually get some proper work done in Paris.
The issue of global growth. We've noticed, at least in the second half of this year, that we got a little slowdown in China. In fact, there's some concerns about the U.S. as well. You saw some of those retail sales numbers earlier. And Europe has their own sort of dilemma, if you will. The state of the world as we end 2015, how do you feel about next year?
Well, it's a little bit depressing that we're still talking about this lackluster at best global growth so long after the financial crisis and all the efforts that we've done to sort of come back from that. I think the United States economy is not going gangbusters, but it's growing at a decent 2–2.5% growth. It's nothing to get too excited about, but it's pretty solid. It'll have soft spots. It has gone through a bit of a soft spot now, but it doesn't seem to be a disaster. We also had good jobless numbers. Again, Europe is kind of dragging itself out of the mire. Slowly, not as well as we would have liked, but it's getting there. And frankly, the European Central Bank is next month probably going to do even more quantitative easing to try and kind of lift Europe out of its funk. Right now, the concern is China and emerging markets. China was the engine that dragged the global economy out of the financial crisis. They've accounted for a huge chunk of global growth. And the fact that China's slowing, it's still growing faster than pretty much any other major economic bloc. Just the fact that it's slowing is clearly worrying. And when the rest of the developing world has been basically very much dependent on China, if China slows down a little bit, they slow down even more. If China slows down a lot, then a lot of these countries are going to have a very tough time. And that is what we should be worried about for 2016.